You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages. Approximately 1,500 for a pardon.
Yes.
Full pardon.
Full pardon or commutation?
Full pardon. We have about 6 commutations in there where we're doing further research.
Okay.
Nice to see you again. So this is a big one. Anything you want to explain about this? We hope they get them. We hope they come out tonight, frankly. If you're expecting it. Approximately 1,500 people. Six commutations.
Were there any cases you did not commute or pardon of people?
We're looking at different things, but the commutations would be the ones that we'll take a look, and maybe it'll stay that way, or it'll go to full pardon.
And the order does require the Bureau of Prisons to act immediately on receipt of the pardons and commutation orders. Sir, this is
Why don't we get that down so they can get them going right now?
Yes, sir.
Is that okay?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
This is a proclamation guaranteeing the state's protection against invasion based on the current crisis at the southern border. It invokes various executive powers relating to the ongoing invasion at the southern border.
Mr. President, let me feel confident that those are not going to be blocked by the courts.
I don't think they will. I don't think they can be. They're very straight up. Why don't you take that and go over here? Could you get him over here, not on the side angle? Do you mind? Just go right over here with your friends. Okay?
Sir, this is an executive.
The fight for freedom and justice continues. That was a transition activity. Welcome back to Transition Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Roku, Amazon Fire. We're everywhere now. Well, shortly after President Trump took office, he kept that promise, pardoning the January 6th political prisoners. The propaganda legacy media continues to freak out and fails to report the truth about January 6th, sticking to the false insurrection and cops dying lies and narrative. At the same time, they refuse to adequately report on the other January 6th pardons of the despicable people that ran the sham J6 Select Committee in the Congress. And that was used to send people like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro to prison, plus hamper the defenses of the J6 defendants. As I promised, we're going to keep covering this issue, especially those pardoned prisoners still being mistreated by the government. And we're interviewing those Americans whose stories we highlighted and interviewed on this show before the pardons and before the president was reelected, when they're ready to do so. One of those Americans, those American families, really is ready for an interview today. Pardoned January 6th political prisoner, Purple Heart War veteran, and retired Marine Corps Captain Chris Cooney is my guest again today. Chris, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, sir.
Sir, greatly appreciate the time that you're giving me on your show. God bless you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, God bless you, my friend, and Annette and your child, man. The first question I have, though, is you had some health issues when you were both going into prison while you were there. My understanding, you're still having some health issues. How are you doing?
I'm doing better. as you well know, they're all combat-related injuries, and a lot of those things tend to present themselves years down the road. So when I was in the hospital previous to going to prison, I got my sentence delayed a little bit because I had to have abdominal surgery related to a previous combat injury. And just recently, I had another related issue to another combat injury related to my nose and head.
And since you've been pardoned, has the VA system responded appropriately, Chris?
The VA's hit or miss. It depends on where you're at. When I was in Kansas City and I was going to the Kansas City VA, I think the treatment was wonderful. It was very veteran-centric. Out here in the Phoenix VA, it tends to be more focused on the you can go down and see more signs about LGBTQ than you can about suicide awareness for veterans, which is a top priority, should be a top priority for veterans and veteran agencies. But no, I was misdiagnosed, and they sent me on my way, and I ended up having to go to the ER and spend time in the ER in the hospital to get another issue rectified for false diagnosis and not able to get my medications.
Yeah, the consistency of care across states and facilities has always been a challenge, man. Well, we have Secretary Doug Collins now. He swears he's going to put the veterans and their families first. I hope you're running that issue with all the LGBTQ and that kind of stuff up the flagpole, because he said he's obeying the executive order that the president put out, and that means removing all that stuff, which is what needed to happen a long time ago. Well, how are you and your family feeling now that you've got the pardon out of the way, in spite of your health issues?
It was a whirlwind. It's been 4 years, going through this. I'm still going through this civilly through the lawsuit that was placed on me by then Attorney General Racine. So this is far from over, and it just got extended into July for depositions. So, but with the pardon, I remember, that night when, that was signed, that executive order for the pardons, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm not one of those emotional, feel good Marine types, right? So, but it's something I just couldn't control, and I broke down. And I'm so thankful for President Trump for what he did with the pardons, because that essentially gives us a new lease on life. I mean, I shouldn't have had to get a pardon anyways for what happened on January 6th, the setup. But, I'm very thankful for Trump that he saw that and he saw it through, and he gave the January 6ers the pardon. I'm very thankful for him.
Yeah. So tell us about the civil case, and where is that coming from?
Well, as you well know, some viewers might not. The former Attorney General of Washington D.C., Racine, stepped out into the spotlight shortly after January 6th and said that he was going to curtail white supremacy and extremism that occurred in Washington D.C. on January 6th, and he basically listed a group of Proud Boys and a group of Oath Keepers or associates of that group that day, and said that we were all white supremacists. And as you know, it's the prosecution, the persecution, and that is the punishment. And it's an attempt to drain us dry and to limit our ability to really just grab onto that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness by financially devastating us. And that's what it's all about. So I got to be really careful what I say. They're essentially saying that I breached a barricade, which is completely false. There's no video, graphical, or pictorial evidence of that day that I did that. I never did do that. And so I'm mentioned in one sentence in that entire document, and I'm just waiting. I'm hopeful that it'll get dropped, but again, I've still got to continue to go through this process and deal with the lawyers and everything else involved in that, sir.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder, District of Columbia only has home rule because Congress approved it starting, I think, in 1975. And the president has actually talked about this recently about doing away with that home rule and having Congress take that back over. I'm assuming that would affect this attorney general's case, or at least who has oversight over it. So, folks, you should be calling Congress and tell them to do the right thing and remove home rule from the District of Columbia. I think that would probably fix that issue.
I think it will. I think overall, I don't think that the former AG has any standing because he's claiming injuries within the District of Columbia for specified people that aren't named. And in tort law, you have to name the specified parties that were supposedly injured. So now we have this going on for 4 years, and the attorneys on the prosecution side, for lack of better words, haven't done anything with the case. They've only done a few depositions, and now they're just now starting. They said they needed more time for evidence and pushed it out to July. So I'm not sure what's going on with it, but I'm hopeful that it'll get dismissed.
Yeah, I hope so too. We'll have to keep an eye on that, though. I wasn't aware of that. There were a lot of nonprofits helping the J6 political prisoners, and the one that I was at an event for them, where I met you and Annette and your son and everything. Are the nonprofits still working with all of the folks that you're aware of, or at least the ones that were working with you?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think that they still are. I think that there are some, people out there that are, hit very hard by this, and I know that I'm in contact with some of those nonprofit agencies. We've had discussions, and going forward, what can we do to make things better? What can we do to help? And what can we do to? There's a lot of ideas floating around. I've got my opinions and ideas of moving forward, but I think they are out there helping people, and I know that we've been in touch.
That's great. Great news. The one I was talking about, folks, is Patriot Freedom Project. The Cynthia Hughes had the honor to meet her and the whole team up there. And then the one I work with locally here, and know most locally here, is my brother's keeper in Mississippi, and that's headed by Ms. Lori Cyree. And I know they've gotten the Mississippi prison all together. I missed the event just last week, I think. To celebrate them and see about taking care of them. So that's good news. I'm glad everybody's still in, and it just hasn't evaporated, It
hasn't, but it seems to be that there's, like you had stated previously, with the nonprofit agencies, there's more than one. So there's no lead charge on anybody that's doing, everybody's kind of doing their own thing. I know Cynthia Hughes has been out there working really hard every day, and she takes a hit every day for the things that she does. And she worked really hard with Julie Kelly to get things done. And, a lot of other things in the works to help, J6ers get out of prison, get to a job, money for lawyers. I'm not privy to all that stuff, but she's been working hard. And, I appreciate it because there seems to be a big fracture in the J6 community right now. It seems to be related to who's doing what, who's getting news media attention, who's doing the best, who's doing the worst, and it's really kind of sad. And I wish that there was one figure that could come together and really unite these different organizations under one umbrella and really just say, hey, look, I know we have differences of opinions. I know we have different ideas of which way we should go, but let's unite and come together for the better, for the good and the cause to make everything better for everybody. And I just, it's sad to see that not happen.
Yeah, I've tried to stay out of those phrases because, like you, I want to try to help everybody because I see the whole group as politically persecuted, and it's something that should never have happened with the United States government or our state and local governments too. I know a lot of folks have been hit with lawsuits and charges, maybe at the state level. The crazy Democrat attorney generals are making noises about that. Well, we got to take a break, Chris. When we come back, we'll we'll talk about, actually, we're going to show a clip of you when you received your pardon. And it is going to be emotional, folks. But I think you need to understand by watching this little clip of Chris when he was notified the pardon was approved, exactly what these folks have been through, because it's been a traumatic experience. We'll be right back with Marine Captain retired Chris Cooney, an American war hero, really, truly. It's been done wrong by our government, but it's being turned around by President Trump and all those that are working with him, right here on Worldview.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
It's been 4 years. And 4 years of fighting, 4 years of struggling, and I'm finally free. I don't even have the words to thank President Trump for what he's done for us. Thank you, everybody, for your support. Praise God. First and foremost, all the praise and glory goes to God, first and foremost. My beautiful wife who supported me, all of you out there who supported me. Thank you. I love you. God bless.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Transition Tuesday, and the reason why that man's part of the transition is because President Trump pardoned the 1,500 J6 political prisoners right after he took office. So this is part of the whole transition system, and his team and he have been promising that and talking about how to do it and figuring out how to do it all the way from before the election, I believe. And Chris Cooney, the man you just saw there, is my guest today. Chris, I want to thank you first for your sacrifice to the country, but thank you for putting that video out publicly, because it's critically important that people understand you are not, look, I'm 5'10.5", and almost 6 feet, but you're not a small fella. You are a warrior. You have a warrior's ethos. I've met you and spent time with you and your family. I understand that. And it takes a lot of stress, pressure, and trauma to get somebody like you to the emotional point that you had the grace to show the American people in that video, doesn't it?
It was like a wave. My wife and I had been watching President Trump all day, just waiting. We didn't know when it was going to occur, but it was compounding over the hours and hours that we watched. And when it hit, it was just a wave of relief. It was a wave of just emotion just came over me. I literally just couldn't control it. And I'm so thankful for President Trump and all the supporters and my amazing bride. I can't show enough appreciation. This is something that I can't ever repay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing that we have been successful in bringing true justice home for folks. And I wanted to ask you get your thoughts on this, because when I saw this news, it's related. This little piece of news broke right after the inauguration that a guy named Ed Martin was the acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. And then a few days ago, President Trump actually nominated him as the full-time U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. And folks, you might remember that the District of Columbia U.S. attorney was a guy named Matthew Graves, who was just a despicable human being that has made the law system in this country harm American citizens that were exercising their constitutional and individual rights given to us by God. The Constitution just identifies some of them. It's not there to protect them. That's on us, and God gives us the ability to do that and gives us those rights. But Ed Martin was part of the Patriot Freedom Project with Ms. Hughes, Cynthia Hughes, and has worked with them all along to help you guys. He's obviously an attorney. How do you feel about it? Seems like the tables are being turned in favor of justice, with Ed sitting there in the D.C. U.S. Attorney's office.
I don't know the man personally, but I know he has worked with the Patriot Freedom Project over the long haul. And I know that he worked tirelessly on the Pardon Project, or the transition, as you call it. And it's amazing to have good people surrounding President Trump finally. It's amazing to have that structure around him that is going to focus on a government of the people, for the people, and by the people finally. After 4 years, we haven't had that, you know. So I'm looking forward to see how this evolves over the next couple of years. But he definitely has a lot of cleanup to do. And it looks like, from what I've seen, they have been doing quite a bit of cleanup, because I know, and so do a lot of other people, that those prosecutors in Washington, D.C., I'll speak on my behalf. They strong-armed me into essentially taking a plea deal. I had no recourse. I knew that I was not going to get a fair trial in a D.C. jury. And I had dismissed 2 previous plea agreements. And it was one of those things where they said, hey, you know, if you don't take this plea deal, you're going to spend hard time in prison. We're going to tack on all these other charges. And it came down to, was I willing to spend 5, 6, 7 years in prison? Or did I want to be at home with my wife and son and supporting them? So I took the plea deal. And we need to get those people out there that look at this legal system as a way to attack political opponents, because that's what it is. It is meant to persecute and prosecute political opponents. Look at all the people in J6, right? 1,600 people were essentially handpicked to be prosecuted by the Biden DOJ. 1,600. By my estimations, there were well over 1 million people. Why those 1,600 people were picked? So it's really interesting why they would pick and choose out of that whole group of people to prosecute these particular individuals. It's not.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It is kind of interesting. You know who? What's his name? Sullivan, the Antifa guy. Now he's being prosecuted, but you never hear anything about it, and you don't hear about him being extorted over plea deals and those kind of things. And every single one of the J6 political prisoners that I've run into and that I've looked at that are Trump supporters have been abused by this system. Is that a fair characterization?
That's an absolute fair characterization. And, you know, going through this from the start to finish, you know, our constitutional rights were violated from the get-go, because COVID was the big thing when we were all going through our processes of going through, you know, agreements and trials and everything else. So the speedy trial clock kept getting told because of COVID. So nobody got a speedy trial. So that was the first violation right there.
Did they force you to accept delays in the trials? Because it's my understanding that if you're a defendant, you have a right to a speedy trial. That's one of the rights. And they can't just change it without talking to you or your attorneys, right?
No, so it's really interesting to look at this. They didn't force me to toll the speedy trial clock, but they kept saying that the amount of information that was being presented or that they were trying to collect was so immense that the prosecutorial side of the House could not aggregate that information in a database and functionally make it available to all the defendants. So to get that information, I wanted to see that information. I needed to see that information. And just to be able to see that, we had to keep tolling the speedy trial clock. And then my first prosecutor got fired. Then my second prosecutor got fired. And then finally, I guess they found a prosecutor that would toe the party line and kind of engage in that behavior. And overall, that particular issue was related to evidentiary issues within the judicial system at that time. That's what I think. That's what I saw.
Well, we've got a question from the live audience. Let's go over to Shell, our host over there, and take that question. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Joseph, sir.
Hi,
Thank you very much, Colonel, Captain. Good to hear from you. Good to see. My question is simple. Do you think that we should have a commission or some type of, something to actually go through the J6 correctly to figure out exactly what occurred and to bring about any possible prosecutions that for people who instigated this? What would you like to see happen afterwards since all this has occurred?
Well, a couple things. Thank you for your question, Joseph. I appreciate it. A couple things that are kind of interesting when you look at these cases. In my case in particular, there was a confidential human source, and his name is Aaron. So I have to be careful what I say in that regard. But he destroyed evidence related to my case. That's exculpatory evidence that I will never, ever get back. And I believe that there were most likely other confidential human sources involved in many, if not all of these cases, or FBI agents, CIA agents, DHS agents on the ground that day. I would like to see complete and total transparency in all the cases. Initially, I was a guy that was going case by case. I was willing to wait for the pardons to come because I want an investigation from the top all the way down to the bottom, from the leadership that let this happen to the people that were on the ground that day, even to the people in the ancillary sides of the House, the judicial and the executive branch. So I think that there needs to be a thorough investigation, including the J6 committee, because we know that they also destroyed information. So I want to see a full, complete investigation. I think that needs to be transparent to the United States public so that we know exactly what happened and why, so that it never happens again.
Yeah, I think Speaker Johnson he has appointed the J6 select subcommittee. I believe it's in the oversight area. It might be judiciary. I'm not sure clear on that. But do you think they'll get Nancy Pelosi, who is on tape admitting the truth? The truth is she's responsible for security of the Capitol that day, and it's on her. She's on video saying that. Would you like to see them get her up there to testify under oath?
I absolutely would, and I've reached out to my senator and my representatives to hopefully testify in a select committee type arena so that people know what happened. People know what I saw that day. Interesting enough, I think it goes a lot deeper than that, sir. I think that if you look at the totality of what happened on J6, it was completely avoidable. And it was avoidable for a lot of different reasons. And you probably served in the military district of Washington, as did I. I served at Marine Barracks 8th and I was in Bravo Company. Bravo Company has an entire company of Marines who are trained in civil military operations for instances just like that. Why weren't they deployed? And then the military district of Washington has an entire battalion of military police officers on hand that could have been deployed within a matter of 20, 30 minutes. Do you really think that agitators, because it really was agitators that day, you really think that agitators would have breached gates or done anything if there was a complement of Marines or soldiers at strategic points used in blocking positions to stop people from going up to the Capitol? I don't think that they would have. And why weren't those people there? Because the military district of Washington, their motto, their mission is to support civil military operations, among other things, in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and the 8th and I unit, that's just a few blocks from the Capitol building, right?
I used to run down to the Capitol and the National Mall every day, less than 10 minutes.
Yeah. We got to take another break, Chris. When we come back, I want to talk about the other pardons from the other president and who he pardoned and what should be done about that and what should be done about that committee and its lawbreaking, because now we know that they broke some laws. We'll be right back with U.S. Marine Corps Captain retired Chris Cooney, an American war hero, on the Rob Maness Show.
Let's chat about these January 6th committee members who got pardons from Biden. Okay, so I collected some receipts. Liz Cheney said, as you will see, Scott Perry requested a pardon from Trump. Scott Perry vehemently denied it, but the inference there is something was nefarious about it. So she gets a pardon, but she's calling out someone else. Then you go over to none other than Adam Schiff, who said, this precedent of giving blanket pardons is a precedent we don't want to see. Well, guess what? You got a pardon, Schiff. Guess who else got a pardon? Let's just throw them out like candy. Let's give one to Adam Kinzinger, who said, I only know of one reason to seek a pardon, because you are worried of guilt. This is what you all said to Republicans. Now you've received pardons. Look in the mirror.
Interesting.
Kettle, look at who's in the mirror. It's you who's called them out. And finally, I just want to say this. There are 21 pro-lifers that Biden put in prison. Innocent individuals who sang about Jesus Christ in front of an abortion clinic in a hallway, not in the clinic. It was a peaceful protest. We played it on this show. Those individuals should be receiving pardons. We are a week ahead of the March for Life, and I hope that the Trump administration deeply considers these peaceful Christians in a peaceful protest who were persecuted by President Biden. They should be freed.
What perfect timing to do so in one.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. My guest today is former J6 political prisoner, retired U.S. Marine Corps captain, and I'd say this in all honesty, an American war hero who has a Purple Heart, which means he was wounded in combat, and a man that has given utmost service to this nation and was there on January 6th. This is Rob's opinion. After speaking with him and his wife at length a couple of times now, that was there as a public service to his country again, because he was insistent on being able to air his grievances to those in power about what was happening with our government, which it was being destroyed from within by nefarious actors. Chris, welcome back. I have to have a segment where we talk about these pardoning of the J6 committee people because of all the things you just heard her say, heard the journalists say about all the things they said about guilt, accepting a pardon, asking for a pardon, and even today the left-wing crazy legacy propaganda media is criticizing President Trump even today for pardoning you guys, the people that were there trying to exercise their rights, and in a situation that was completely set up by nefarious actors. I don't know that they were all government actors, but I know they were nefarious actors that included government people, people on the payroll of the government, confidential informants, and confidential human sources. They were all there, and they were there to set up a situation to entrap Trump supporters because they just have to go after this man.
It's interesting. When we got our pardon, if you go to the DOJ pardon department and you look on the definition of what a pardon is, it says that it is to mitigate the punishment that comes with the supposed or the alleged crime. It is not meant to waive any type of guilt. So by taking a pardon, you are essentially admitting to guilt. But the issue at hand is the J6ers were pardoned because of how they were treated. We know that this was an absolute setup. So it was for the one day on January 6th that these alleged events occurred by other J6ers, right? So I looked at the pardon issues as it relates to the January 6th committee, and I did not see a pardon that goes from date to date. It just says that they were pardoned. So I would really like to have attorneys take a look at that and say, well, the January 6th committee started on date X and it ended on, this date right here. Can they be held accountable during any time period within that pardon time frame? So it'll be pretty interesting. Are they liable as far as civil claims toward action? I'm really not sure what the answer to that is, but regardless of the circumstances, that evidence could hopefully get some of those people out of office. And that's really my hope, is to get those bad actors out of office when this information comes up, if they are in fact covered by a pardon.
Yeah, fortunately, a lot of them are out of office, but I would like to see them banned from ever running for any elected office again because of what they did. And, every time Kinzinger or Cheney opened their mouth, they were talking about you being an insurrectionist, and anybody that showed up there that was a Trump supporter were insurrectionists. That's defamatory language that just absolutely is not true. If I was one of you all, even without an attorney, I'd figure out a way to file multiple defamation lawsuits against these people, even though it may not be able to get convicted. The process is the punishment, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I could tell you first thing, Colonel, that, on my end, we have filed notice to the federal government that we intend to go forward with further action. So I'm at that point right now. I don't know if that can be inclusive of other individuals, but, my main thing, again, is to seek justice and accountability across the entire spectrum of J6. And that's what everybody should be seeking, so that we can have a government that operates as it should in a republic for its citizens. And that's what I'm really hopeful for.
And that's why you were there on January 6th. Exactly why you were there. That's why.
Absolutely. And to protect people.
Yeah.
My big thing going down there was to protect people. I mean, for years, we looked at the United States burning, destroyed, billions of dollars worth of damages, police officers injured, police officers maimed. And as an American, I don't know that anybody can look at that, even as a service member, and say, I can stomach that. I absolutely can't. And I wanted to go down to DC that day to protect those people. I don't care if you're a liberal. I don't care if you're an independent. I don't care if you're a Republican. I signed that dotted line, decades ago now, it seems like forever, to protect and serve this Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I believe that we were infiltrated by domestic terrorists. We weren't the terrorists. We were infiltrated by them. And I wanted to protect this country from those people.
I think you're onto the truth. That's what I think. The facts eventually, once we can get it, fully investigated in an objective way instead of this slanted way the January 6th Select Committee did, the facts are going to show that the crowd was not only infiltrated by domestic terrorists, but domestic enemies did the planning and the execution, and everybody's got to be held accountable. Look, you guys, you all have been held accountable, even though you were innocent of what you were accused of. You had to go through an accountability process. Well, the real guilty parties, in my opinion, have to be held accountable, and that's what a whole lot of what the Trump administration is about, even outside of January 6th. We got another question over in the audience. Let's go over there and take that. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Liz, sir.
Yes, sir. Hi, Colonel Maness. Captain. Captain, my question is about your wife. I was former Marine Corps, and I miscarried, and so I understand what that is like. My question to you is, with your wife and your son, the trauma that is involved in just being surrounded and having their own civil liberties violated so egregiously, do they have any recourse for what was done to them? I mean, you're talking long-term, especially with a 4-year-old child or a young child, the trauma. Do you have any recourse legally for them? And how are they doing it right now?
Thank you for the question. Semper Fi, brother. This was absolutely devastating to my wife. As you know, we lost our child, as you said, and going through this for 4 years, we have not been able to go through that grieving process, even now still going through this. And it has absolutely affected my son, who is now almost 9, the PTSD-related issues, not wanting to be away from his parents, that independence, that fear, police sirens, ambulance sirens, things of that nature that scare him, scare my wife. It is so difficult to really come back from an issue like that. The colonel and I both served in combat, and those stormtroopers, lack of better words, came to my house that day using tactics, techniques, and procedures and weapons that belong against the battlefield, used against the enemies of our nation and not on American soil against U.S. citizens. That is hard to come back from. We have been dealing with it, and it has been a long road. And it took me, I retired in 2013. I still, to this day, struggle with PTSD-related events from my time in combat, from my loss of Marines, from my loss of friends. I still struggle. I expect that my wife and son will continue to struggle with this for decades, and my son into his adulthood. So I am hopeful. I believe that God is guiding us in the right direction, and we are investigating options to hold people accountable for those actions that day. But it's interesting, and I want to throw this out there. We had a special agent there that day, Garrett O'Boyle. He was on the SWAT team that raided our house. He has since come to me and my wife and said, I want to ask for your forgiveness for being there that day for what happened, because I know that what happened to you was absolutely wrong. The case manager for the FBI that briefed them on my case, they had been casing my house for about 2 weeks, told them that I was making illegal weapons in my basement. I had a legal FFL business, and that I was a violent perpetrator. That's what they were told. That's why they came at my house and my wife and my son the way that they did. So I'm also hopeful that all those individuals can be rooted out from our government and be held accountable, but only time will tell.
Yeah, were those words on the affidavit that got them the search warrant in the first place?
Those words weren't on the affidavit that I saw. I am going off of firsthand knowledge from a person that was on the SWAT team that day that was briefed on my case. I had just had surgery 2 days prior to them raiding my house. They had followed me when I had surgery that day to the VA. My arm was in a cast and a sling. I was completely helpless to whatever they wanted to do. They could have knocked on my door and said, hey, Mr. Keenan, we'd love to talk to you. I would have gotten an attorney and I would have talked to them. I mean, at that point in time, I had a great amount of respect for federal law enforcement as a whole. So I would have talked to them. But they knew, they lied about what happened, and hopefully we can hold them accountable for that.
Yeah, folks, as a matter of fact, Mr. O'Boyle, you may recognize, he's one of the, he came out as a whistleblower after this incident. It says that this incident where he just had the wrong feeling and he saw that what was happening was wrong is one of the big reasons why he became a whistleblower from the FBI. The FBI has just completely destroyed his life too. Won't let him get a job, pressure his security clearance, all of that stuff. So, Chris, before we go to this break, are you able to get your FFL license, your federal firearms license back so you can go back to your business?
I'm going to try. So I've been really advocating for J6ers to do follow a process, right, that absolutely worked for me. When you get pardoned, that pardon, this is new ground for everybody. When you get pardoned, file that as a motion to close your case that the judge has to sign off on that. Because without that, there's not going to be any annotation that you were pardoned on the federal side of the house. Take that pardon also to your county, your state law enforcement agency, the sheriff department, and put it on file with your local law enforcement and your state law enforcement so that you protect yourself, because we've seen some issues arise lately with other J6ers to protect yourself. But this also allows you to, in my instance, I wanted to test the waters. So I went out and bought a .22 long rifle for a birthday present for my son, since we can now enjoy the great outdoors like that. And I was successfully able to purchase a firearm. I'm in the process of applying for my CCW. Apply for that CCW, because it is going to come up anytime a police officer pulls you over that you are a concealed carry person, and that shows that you have gone through the process, the rigorous process for the firearms issues.
Yeah, exactly. And you bring up a good point, which we're going to talk about after this last break in this last segment, is what the system is doing or not doing to even help some folks that are pardoned. And you may recognize the name of Jeremy Brown. We're going to talk about what's going on with him here with Chris Cooney right after this break on Worldview.
Now we'd like to take a moment to follow up on a story we brought to you just a few days ago. Retired Green Beret Jeremy Brown has been sentenced to 87 months in prison. Senior U.S. District Judge Susan Bucklew handed down the over 7-year sentencing. The 80-year-old judge said Brown's claims that the federal government planted evidence in his Florida home was during a raid was ridiculous. Clearly, a jury did not completely agree, however, with the judge. They found him not guilty on 4 charges, which were related to what the government's claims that secret CD documents were found in his home. Brown claims he never saw those CD documents prior to the raid on his home. It's worth noting that Brown's home was only raided after Jeremy released video and audio recordings of the FBI allegedly attempting to recruit him as an informant prior to January 6th. It is believed that Jeremy's actions regarding the release of those recordings led the federal government to retaliate against him by obtaining a warrant on his home. Prior to Brown's sentencing, the U.S. Army Special Forces Master Sergeant did not back down. According to reporters in the courtroom, Brown looked dead at the prosecutor and said, quote, "My service cannot be tarnished by lesser men." Also prior to his sentencing, Congressman Gus Bilirakis Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna and Florida State Representative Bernie Jacks all wrote letters in support for Brown. Representative Jacks told the judge he was very impressed by the accounts of Mr. Brown's great conduct while incarcerated during this case. Many have described Mr. Brown as a model prisoner for leading Bible study, de-escalating altercations, and for building up morale with fellow inmates by leading certain recreational activities. Other supporters from Brown described him as a family man who loves his country. Brown is currently appealing this conviction and fighting off another case in D.C. related to January 6th. Now, if you'd like to help Jeremy Brown with his D.C. case and the appeal in his Florida case, head over to GiveSendGo.com and search Jeremy Brown Defense.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, and it's Transition Tuesday, and the part of the transition for the Trump administration we're talking about with this pardoned J6 political prisoner, retired Marine Captain Chris Cooney, and his experience, how his family's doing, how he's doing, and a lot of the issues surrounding January 6th. It's been a great discussion today, and Chris, Sergeant Brown has not been released yet. I was hoping that he would be released before we did the show. He was supposed to get out last night, and just checked the wires before we came back from the break, and I haven't seen anything yet. But this is a good example, and probably the most egregious example of the abuse of January 6th political prisoners. And this guy, I don't believe, was even there on January 6th.
I'm not sure if he was there or not. I've been a huge proponent of Master Sergeant Brown. He's a fellow service member, and I've been trying to advocate as much as I can for people to call their representatives and really try and get him out. There's a lot of people doing more than I am, absolutely. But he should not be in prison right now. He was pardoned for January 6th. And I believe I have seen the documents for the supposed weapons charges that he was allegedly committed. And every single one of those went for testing to the FBI laboratory, and he was 100% excluded as having contact with any of those quote unquote weapons. The ones interesting to me are the grenades, right? I have challenged that since day one, because you and I know about dodics and how dodics work. They are very detailed. I can tell if a grenade has been, what time it was signed out, what time it was signed back in, who signed it out, where it was, and the paper trail that follows that particular grenade all the way. And they just say, oh, it happened to be in Afghanistan that day. And I'm going to call a spade here. I think that's absolute trash. But he should not be in prison.
Yeah, I first came upon the case when I saw him release the video about the FBI guys showing up at his house trying to recruit him to be a CHS or a CI before January 6th. And I don't think he would have even released that video had January 6th not happened. And we saw this evidence that it was instigated by government employees of some sort. Whether you call them agents, CHSs, CIs, or police officers, when it comes to the Capitol Police or the Metro PD. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, the federal government is able to get a warrant. Are these guys lying on these warrant affidavits? I've seen a lot of accusations of that in my talking with folks that have been in your situation because of January 6th.
I believe that they are, and I believe that the level of credibility that they're producing to actually get these warrants, the standard is very low. They just said, hey, it's J6 related. We need to go in and get this guy. And they could probably say just about anything because of the political atmosphere and the weaponization of the current administration to go after every single one of us. So I think the standard is actually pretty low to get these warrants.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, as you said in the last segment, I used to have great faith in federal law enforcement and federal intelligence agencies. I've used them. I've been supported by them. I've had my law enforcement and intel operations folks working with organizations like the Joint Terrorism Task Forces and those kind of things on on a daily basis in order to protect our families and protect our country. But if their standard is to tell lies just to get a conviction or a guilty plea, that whole system has got to be turned upside down. I had a long conversation with a former FBI supervisor yesterday, and I interviewed one about his book a couple of weeks ago. And they all say there's still good rank and file people in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They didn't really, they didn't mean it. And when I asked them about, well, do you teach people to step up and say no? One said they really were just following orders, but the other gentleman said, yeah, we do. We actually teach people to say no. And that brought up Mr. O'Boyle's interaction with your family during that raid. And I'm like, well, why didn't he feel comfortable standing up and saying no? There must be something wrong with the system that has to be addressed.
It's difficult, Colonel. You know as well as I do, for a private or somebody come up to you and I and say, hey, I believe that this is wrong. I think that there has to be a very dynamic relationship between the leader and the led, where those individuals feel that they can honestly come up to us and say what's on their mind, whether something's right or wrong. And I think that it all boils down to the leadership and the environment that some of these FBI agents were accustomed to and that they were put in, because I do believe that there are still some good FBI agents, federal law enforcement out there. I have to believe that. Not everybody in the law enforcement agency can be bad, but I think that they're scared to death to come forward and be whistleblowers for look at Garrett. He's been out of a job for 28 months, no pay, no way to support his family. And if you go against the government, that's what you have in store for you. And that's not acceptable.
And we have laws that are supposed to prohibit that kind of reprisal and retaliation on whistleblowers. And that's one of the things I think we need to take a really hard look at on the FBI side and other agencies that have to do with intelligence, because, like Snowden, when he did his whistleblowing publicly, I'm convinced it's because he didn't have an adequate system on the classified side to be able to have the protections that a whistleblower needs for that level of information. I think we have to do the same thing with the FBI, because obviously they're getting away with reprisal on the whistleblowers. So something's got to be done. What would you like to see happen first with the FBI's organization, now that Kash Patel's the director, Dan Bongino, my friend Dan, is the deputy director? I'm so excited about those two guys taking over the organization. But I'll be honest with you, I still am not convinced that it should stay in the current status that it is. Maybe we should just turn it back into just a crime lab, a big fancy national crime lab, and let the state and local folks do law enforcement the way it's supposed to be.
I do. I agree with you 100%. And I agree that the federal agencies, right, because the vast majority of power is supposed to reside within the states. And the federal government, if there can never be an argument or something that is can't be taken care of, then the federal government steps in. So I think we should really consider downsizing the Federal Bureau of Investigation and a lot of those intelligence agencies and go back to a supporting role instead of a proactive role in the United States. So that's one thing I would like to see, and I hope there is a complete reorganization. But I also want to make a comment on why I think that we are here. I think that this has been decades in the making. And I say that because post 9/11, there was the introduction of the Patriot Act that clearly violates the Fourth and Fifth Amendments and really encroaches upon our First and Second Amendment rights as United States citizens. So I think that the Patriot Act allowed the federal government to intercede and inject itself into our lives in such a manner as to kind of hypothetically create the extremist threat that they supposedly say exists within the United States, and actively pursue those people and persecute those people in the name of justice. But really it's political persecution and weaponization of any government that wants to use those tools at their disposal. So I'm an advocate. I've been doing a lot of research, and I want to see the Patriot Act dismantled. I think it's outlived its purpose in 2025, and we need to go back to brass tacks and have those supporting agencies do what they do best. They should be investigating all those terrorism acts in the country, outside of the country, not in the United States. I apologize, but not in the United States.
I agree with you. You know, and really, we have hundreds of thousands of potential terrorists inside this country now because of Joe Biden's policies, the failure in Afghanistan with all these unvetted refugees, all these Chinese military-age males that have come through the border, and those agencies on the intel side and counterintelligence side need to be looking at bad guys, not at American citizens that were accused of exercising their rights. Well, Chris, thank you very much for coming on today. I appreciate your time. God bless you. I look forward to chatting with you again as the need arises and new news breaks and everything, because I know you're going to do great things. So where can folks find you on X before I let you go?
Absolutely. Thank you first and foremost, Colonel, for your time today and all your viewers. If you want to look me up, I'm engaged out there on X. It's dark_horse92.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Give my best to your wife and your son and all of your friends, Chris. Thank you very much. Well, tomorrow is Whistleblower Wednesday. We're talking with Jake Novak about the babies that the Hamas Nazis killed. I think the funeral is tomorrow, so it'll be a sad day, but it's something that's got to be highlighted, and the facts have to be confronted over and over again. So I'll see you then on the Rob Maness Show.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview